Behind every great product is a great seal. Join us at the crossroads of preeminent product design engineering, seal mastery, and supply chain excellence, and learn from the makers of our future.
Welcome and thanks for joining us today for conversations with the people behind the products that are making the world a better place, and for conversations with leaders in the seal industry who are helping make all that happen. My name is Bill Sharrett, and I'm your host for today. I'm joined by a colleague, Nand Patel, who we'll introduce in a minute, but we're doing something a little different today. We're talking about some of the pressures that are really driving our industry right now, the stuff that everyone is focused on, what's keeping everyone awake at night. There's a tremendous pressure on with most manufacturers is to find second sources for products that are drying up because of supply chain disruptions. It's the supply chain Armageddon everyone's been living since lockdown. And we realize that what we do and the way we are structured as a business actually really helps reduce the risk associated with looking for second sources. So we're going to talk about risk management, what you need to look out for, how you should do it best. And that's the conversation today. I remember our sponsorship message. This show is brought to you by Darcoid. We're building this podcast as a searchable store of knowledge, something that you can reference if you're new to seal design. And if you're starting out in your career in engineering, then hopefully you'll learn from successful engineers whose work is changing the world. All right, Nand, you're up. My guest today is Nand Patel, Director of New Business and Product Development at Darcoid. Greetings, Nand.
Thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Let's get into a little bit about who you are and what you do. What's your role here at Darcoid, Nand?
So my role essentially changed over the last couple of years. I am Director of New Product and New Business Development. Previously, before that, so I've been at Darcoid for 19 years now, worked in quality for 16 and a half, 17 years. So it's a long journey. I've done everything in quality management, from working with customers and working with our manufacturing partners all over the world. A little bit about me. My background is in chemical engineering. I have a master's in chemical engineering with a polymer science background. And previous to this, joining Darcoid, I worked at a company that did plastics recycling. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was a novel idea with a lot more focus now on carbon capture and cleaning up the environment. I worked at a company that actually did plastics recycling for engineered plastics. And 20 plus years back, that was a novel idea because there weren't many companies that were doing recycling in engineered plastics.
Very good.
Such as ABS and polystyrene, right? Which is used all over the world in televisions to refrigerators and the likes in automobile and anything and everything you can think of. So a major problem in the world that was there 20 years back is actually a bigger problem now.
Well, you led the way. You spearheaded, led the charge. Well done, man. Excellent. So graduated from University of Toledo, I believe. Were you born and raised in Toledo?
I was not. I was actually born and raised in India. Did my undergrad or bachelor's degree in chemical engineering in India, and then decided to come and pursue my master's here in the US, which is how I ended up at University of Toledo.
Perfect. Excellent. And from my personal perspective, our audience members should know that there is no one who knows more about polymers, rubber manufacturing, all the steps in the process from compounding all the way through finishing, storing and handling, obviously quality systems, Nand really developed and implemented and built out Darcoid's quality capability. What this guy knows or doesn't know ain't worth knowing, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you, Nan. Glad you're here with us today. So thought about putting this show together because, a lot of the podcast has been talking to people about their products and how their careers went and so on, which is all well and good. But my goodness, what we're living and breathing in the manufacturing and supply chain industry is quite an amazing period of stress to the system. And our customers, their customers, other people no one is going to be tied to a single source anymore. Strategically, they realize there is a major risk associated with a single source. A region goes down because of COVID. Shipping in a certain area blows up. Material supply is suddenly not is impacted in a particular region or globally. So alternates have to be found. And it's in the rubber industry when people don't know a lot about all that goes into making a seal work really well in a given application. If they don't factor all that in, it's very easy to say, hey, this black rubber will work as well as that black rubber. So we're here to talk about the steps we take to assure if we need to resource any kind of supply, how careful we have to be, and the steps we have to take. So hopefully that's what we can cover today, Nand. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, sure. And if I may take a step back and add to what you just said, in the rubber world, most companies will say, here is our material with an ASTM string. And
what is ASTM, Nand?
That is a standard that was written by the American Standard for materials. And essentially, it was designed or developed for the purpose of trying to put all manufacturers on the same foot. 20, 25, 30 years back, manufacturers would come out with a material and would say mine is better than yours. And so there was a standard put together in order to say, everybody tests the same standard.
Maybe the referee.
Maybe a referee. But in today's world, that's not enough. It's a good starting point.
So what does an ASTM string, how would I know an ASTM string if it walked up and slapped me in the face? What does it look like on documentation?
Yeah, if for example, on a nitrile material that you're using, you would probably see a ASTM string that would say ASTM D2000, and then it will start with 714.
And a string of digits and numbers after that?
A string of digits and numbers. Yep. It would be something like a B14, B34, which is generally compression set. And then it would, depending on your application, it could be stuff like EO14, EO34, which are oil immersions. And then you may have something to do with a fluid or fuels. It could be EF21, EF31. And then you could have other things in it for different materials. It could be the tear strength. You could have a low temp property that is required, maybe an F15 or F17 for a brittleness test.
Dude, clearly this is a long string of characters that represents a whole bunch of tests. You're rattling them off well, you know it really well. We are a member of ASTM ourselves as a company. But for most people, it takes many years to become conversant with what they actually mean. Is that correct?
That is correct. And as I said, that's a good starting point. And in today's complex world of hundreds of thousands of manufacturers all around the world saying our material meets this ASTM string, again, it's a starting point. But when you're talking about risk and risk mitigation, our job is to make sure it's not just about ASTM string, but what it means to a customer's application.
So, I know from personal experience that those ASTM tests and oils and fluids are very standard, broad buckets, if you will. And so many of our customers are using variants where an elastomer might perform a little differently. Oftentimes, a little different is fine. Many times, a little different means the difference between something working and something failing in the worst possible way, right? So, good point. So let's take it from how it often inboards to us. We get a request from often someone in supply chain says, "Oh my goodness, can you source XYZ for me? This part." We will take the time to understand all the requirements in terms of what lead time is required, where in the world it needs to be inventoried, um, any of the supply chain issues that are important. And then it quickly goes to a technical conversation. Can you walk us through how that technical conversation happens now?
Yeah, sure. So, with like any application, material is a starting point, and ASTM string is also a starting point. But where we differ or where we do risk mitigation is to ask questions about where is this product going to be used? Where is this material going to be used? And we dig a little deeper into where the customer is going to be using a given seal.
So where in their equipment, right?
Where in their equipment, what is it going to be exposed to? What are the temperatures you're looking at?
The actual use conditions, as opposed to, gosh, oftentimes these prints we see are 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, and we know that what once was specified and probably supplied in when the engineer was doing their original testing worked great then, but they might have changed up fluids and process speeds and temperatures since then, right?
Yes. And when we're talking about the risk mitigation problem that is being faced all around the world, every single commodity in the world is impacted.
Mm-hmm.
So if a customer is using a fuel or a fluid or an oil, there is potentially a chance that some ingredient has changed either over time or over the last couple of years, which could have an impact on the elastomer that's used.
I got a story about that. I had a customer who called and said, your seals are failing, and they're swelling all of a sudden. Nothing's working, and what have you done different? And we ran the fire drill and nothing was different, and nothing was different at their end, but it took a few weeks. But we found out that their lubrication grease, the supplier had made a tiny formulation change in that lubrication grease, which just pushed our high performing material from the edge of high performing into the, oh my God, it's swelling and no performing. So yeah, so many changes to so many components can have knock on effects. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And if you think about it, for the example you're talking about with a high performing material where the swell was less than 5%, the customer application performed pretty well. And now because of a new ingredient, the swell went from 5 to 8%. And all of a sudden it doesn't work because your assembly starts failing or you're not getting the performance that's required with the seal that's not adequate for the new oil that was put in place.
Right.
And so, yes, that's why we say ASTM string is a starting point. But again, things like this, we take care of making sure that we're testing that in the customer fluids. When they change, we have to dig a little deeper to find out what happened.
So put a pin in that testing in customer fluids. What happens if there's not an ASTM string on the print? Oftentimes there are no strings on the print. Oftentimes it's called out as a material family type and durometer, and that's about it, right?
That is correct. And I think that in those instances, that's even a bigger worry with anybody providing a generic material that can be sourced from anywhere in the world without regards to what kind of an application it's going into.
Right.
And so just to give you an example of a material can be as simple as a nitrile 70 durometer. But in the world of nitrile, depending on the performance requirement, you can go from a 18% ACN content to 50%. But
that's the polymer backbone of the actual material.
That is correct. And that has an impact on your low temperature. It may have an impact on your high temperature requirement. It will have an impact on the volume swell of certain fluids. It may have impact on compression set. So on and on and on it goes.
And
which is
ACN
why
is the most expensive ingredient in that batter, that cake mix, right?
Yes.
And if a manufacturer is looking to shave a few pennies, they'll drop out ACN and bump up carbon, for example, right?
That is correct. Or they may substitute a lot more with plasticizers that are cheap ingredients that are added to act as a filler and reduce the polymer content.
Right.
Hence, by affecting your volume or your compression set or other properties that are required for the seal to perform.
And it's the polymer content that gives that seal material its particular performance characteristics, its chemical resistance and so on.
That is correct, yes.
Excellent. Going back to an earlier point, I was talking to Jeremy Galton a few weeks ago on the show, and one thing he said really stood out to me. He said, customers will take your product and do things with it you can never imagine. So that's also part of that whole got to be careful if you're substituting out any critical components in that product. You got to make sure they work, right?
Absolutely. And that's why at Darcoid, what we pride in is not just asking the question of, here is a print, can you code it? And it's 2 steps, saying, okay, where is it being used? How is it being used? And it gives us the risk mitigation that we're talking about, right? Because we want to make sure that we provide a solution understanding your application better.
So back to a point earlier that we put a pin in, I'm going to lead you. I'm going to lead the witness in this one. We have some unique capabilities in terms of understanding material compatibility in the customer's particular soup mix, if you will, of chemistries and temperatures. Do you want to talk to that capability, Nand?
Yeah, I mean, so again, understanding the customer requirements, we have a whole host of different things that we can do with it. We have a test bench where we're able to do compression set testing. And the compression testing can be done at different temperatures because you may be interested in knowing what the material does or how it rebounds if it's exposed to a certain temperature, right? And that's an important characteristic to make sure the material is able to rebound after it's been compressed for a certain amount of time, right? Or we have ability to do fluid soak test, whether it's in our test bench or whether it's working with a third-party lab that's certified to ISO 17025. So we do work with accredited labs that understand the ASTM standards well, that understand our testing well. In addition to that, we can do physical as well as mechanical characterization of materials. And we can do a whole host of testing, whether it's doing a DSC, doing a TGA, doing failure analysis, doing low temperature testing, compression set, as I mentioned before. So we can do a whole bunch of testing, whether it's in-house or working with a partner that has a lot of capability to do testing.
So we have we find ourselves helping customers who are moving so fast. This is just one of many products that they're wrestling with to find solutions on. We can do that evaluation for them, so their test lab facilities resources can be used on other issues. So it works really well to help out along those lines, and we can do it testing on as molded seals as well as slabs, and that's another benefit. Really understanding the performance of the seal component in the customer's application rather than being a theoretical data point.
That is correct. So to add to your point, most ASTM string testing is done on slabs and buttons. And that's a good start, as I said, but
standardized, right?
Standardized testing. what Darcoid brings to the table is, in addition to that, having the ability to do testing in our lab, which may be on actual product.
Right.
And in a customer setting.
Yep. Makes all the difference. All the difference. So we didn't talk. So we talked about materials. Boy, did we talk about materials. And I know that we barely scratched the surface. So this is just a kind of a teaser here. But workmanship in terms of, okay, so we find the material that's going to work. It fits the supply chain, fits the customer's logistics requirements. What about the molding part, and how do we control workmanship and molding quality work?
Yeah. So to that, I think there's a lot of different standards in the industry. Standard started out with RMA, which was a Rubber Manufacturers Association guidelines that was used a number of years back and has now evolved with times, right? So there is a aerospace standard. There's a ISO 3601 standard that's used in the industry, where we get into the specifics of is under what magnification do you want it check that. And so we do work with manufacturers to put that in based on your criticality of your application. Most customers would say, I just need a general purpose O-ring. We could go with a grade N, which is accepted universally. But some customers will say, you know what, my application is a little more than that. Then we work with our manufacturers to make sure it's a -S, which is more specific, more stringent with respect to flash or non-fills or other type of defects that you generally see in manufacturing. And then if your application was even stricter than that, then there is CS standard. So a lot of those controls come in via different methods, making sure the tool is capable of producing parts that can meet those standards. And in addition to that, we may have a inspection at the end of it where it will guarantee that what you're seeing meets your specification.
Perfect. So that's a long way down the road. I was just thinking maybe we need to back up a bit. I mean, we've onboarded, we've understood the application, we've taken a look at your documents. I think something that we can do really quick once we've matched up the application requirements with how it's actually described on your documents, we can give our customers a very quick analysis of their existing exposure risk right now. Should someone say, "Hey, I've got a product that meets your print," we can tell our customers, based on what we found out, how much risk they're exposed to by accepting anyone coming along saying we've got an equivalent. So that's the point where our customers can make up their mind on just how critical it is. And oftentimes they'll develop the conversation with us to go down the path of additional testing when we propose candidate replacement compounds and validate those, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Good. So that's worked for us really well in terms of keeping our customers in production with product that works as well as the original specification. And it gives them some options when they need desperately to have a second source on the seal component. So that's a big package in terms of what we offer. And my commentary on that is Darcoid's big enough to pull it off, but we're small enough to care. If you don't have a 6-figure seal spend, some of those larger seal manufacturers that you might want to go work directly with, they don't have the time of day to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. So, I mean, I think the second source is not just about materials. It's about manufacturing. It's about finding the right partner that can manufacture it. And then it's about the quality of product, from mixing of the batter or rubber to the finished goods that we provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a lot of steps that are in between second sourcing from, let's say, from Asia to North America.
Mm-hmm.
And our job has always been to minimize the risk, not only from the perspective of supply chain, but from the perspective of material, from the perspective of just manufacturing the part the right way that will meet your application, and all the risk associated with manufacturing it, whether it's from mixing the rubber to molding the part to finished goods.
And the fulfillment and the getting it to your point of assembly when you need it. Critical, right?
That is correct. Yes.
So we're finding that we're developing this expertise, and customers are looking for, if they're buying or sourcing Asian manufactured product, there's a lot of pressure to bring that, onshore it back to North America. Sometimes that's not really possible based on this really the baseline costs involved. But we also have another region of excellence, which is Europe, which has some excellent capacity, so that we can kind of provide solutions based on where you want to localize manufacturing that best suits the supply chain. It's a global approach.
That is correct. Yes, and I think what Darcoid prides itself in is making sure you're choosing the right material and the right partner wherever you need us to be. So we work with manufacturing partners in North America, as you alluded, and then we have manufacturing partners in Asia, and we have manufacturing parts in Europe to make sure we are able to support the customer's needs no matter where they are.
And we have relationships with these plants. Your passport is full to overflowing with stamps from evidence of travel
That is correct.
Around the world, right?
That is correct. Yeah. So my previous job title was director of quality, and over the years I've traveled to many, many, many countries and many, many plants all over the world, qualifying them, auditing them, and making sure the right partners we want to work with.
Because it's relationships, knowing that they have the right quality practices, proving it, showing it to us. And then if there is an issue, there's always going to be an issue somewhere along the line. Having those relationships so we know who to talk to move quickly to resolve and get back in production. Yes.
That is correct. I mean, a classic example is, when a customer calls and has an issue with a manufacturing partner in Asia, we were able to help a customer get product within 1 week from a local source. So
jump to the head of the line at that local source, I seem to remember.
That is correct.
That's some leverage, Nand. Yeah.
Yeah. So but yeah, the important thing is relationships. But as we go along this, from the perspective of how Darcoid serves the customer with risk mitigation, we are not just auditing plants that we work with. We actually go one step above that. We are actually going to the material source where our manufacturing partners are getting the rubber from.
Mm-hmm.
And we have actually gone and audited the manufacturing of the rubber or compounding of the rubber itself to see what kind of risks exist at the material level. So the risk mitigation is from the perspective of material. It's from the perspective of making the parts and the manufacturing of the parts, finished goods, and then the supply chain and everything else in between.
Yeah, perfect. There's a lot to unpack there. Hopefully, our audience member will consider this as demands to find alternate sources, qualified sources, reliable sources comes across their desk. Where this is what we do. This is how we're structured. I think we've given you a good sense of. We understand your application, understand how you're using the product, how you need the logistics support going forward, and we match that up from your application upwards rather than from a generic try this. That's how we mitigate risk, manage risk. This is a high risk environment for resourcing, and we like to sleep well at night. And that's how we do it, right?
That is correct. And I think in addition to that, it's all about making sure that the risk is mitigated in the process and is not a part of your inspection.
Don't inspect out quality. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think it's important to remember that one of the major value add that Darcoid does bring to the table is quality, and an inspection department that makes sure that the risk is minimized before you get the product or the customer gets the product.
Excellent. I can tell you're only fresh out of your role running our quality operations now. That's still very near and dear to your heart, for sure. But it's a key component of our entire business structure. So there we are. And anything else you'd like to add? I think we covered a lot of ground. Don't want to make it too complex, too overwhelming, but hopefully our audience member will get a sense of how to do it right.
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I think the important thing to remember is there is a lot of places where things can go wrong, but that's what Darcoid is here for, because we do understand manufacturing, we do understand materials, and we do understand that the finished goods need to meet a certain requirement.
Yep, perfect. Gosh, you've done a lovely job plugging the organization. If anyone needs to get in touch with us, LinkedIn or just straight to the website, I know what I'd say, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I think we are reachable by our website. We're reachable by phone. I'm one email away from, obviously asking or addressing any questions.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we are reachable by any means possible.
Except carrier pigeon.
Well, good. I mean, that still exists with Twitter.
There you go. Very good. Very good. All right. I think that we'll wrap here. I covered a lot of ground. Risk management, risk mitigation in the wonderful world of resourcing and finding alternates. If you need help, you know where to find us. I hope this has been helpful on your journey. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Makers of Our Future podcast. Behind every great product is a great seal. Learn more about how we can help at www.darcoid.com. That's DARCOID.com. The best seal, on time, zero defects, Darcoid.